The night of March 20th. I was in Mrs. Jasmine's class when Steve came up to me.
Yo, Nick, wanna come over to sleep at the park tonight at my friend's house on Friday?
He said, "Oh yeah, definitely," I replied. One thing though, I won't be able to spend the whole night, but I'll come around 5 in the morning. I'm going night fishing that night with my dad.
Okay, man.
Steve said in disappointment. The whole night fishing thing was a lie. I knew my parents were going to let me spend the night anywhere that night, since I had a scout camp out the next day. I didn't want Steve to think my parents were strict, so I told him I was going night fishing with my dad in the pond.
Well,
Steve said,
just come at 5 a.m. and bring food, because we'll be blasting rap music and play night basketball. Frank's gonna bring his dad's police spotlights.
I told Steve I could stay at the park that evening until 8 p.m. so I could hang out. On Friday, I threw together a backpack and ran up to the park. I was carrying an old rusty tomahawk in my hand that Steve wanted me to bring. Steve was already at the park. "Yo, Steve, I brought the tomahawk."
Idiot! People might think we're doing sketchy stuff.
I hid the tomahawk in a crack I found in a big tree, and after that we started hanging around. Steve was blasting some catchy rap music on a speaker when Frank arrived. Hooper Flam was behind him.
Hooper will be spending the night at the park too.
Hooper's first words were,
"Man, where the weed at?"
I was not fond of Hooper coming, but again, I thought I'd be leaving soon. We played basketball whilst blasting music for a while. I was getting bored of basketball, so I suggested, "Hey, you guys want to go somewhere, like the abandoned houses?" Hooper replied,
Nah, man, we can't go there.
Steve and Frank, though, loved the idea. Frank even suggested manhunt. I figured we could go to the abandoned houses in the woods. I still had a few hours before I had to leave. Hooper reluctantly went with us. On the way there, we got into a heated conversation. Steve said,
Man, we should do some sort of ritual at the abandoned houses.
Frank replied,
Hey, man, I brought a Ouija board.
Immediately I knew Frank was lying. He didn't even have a backpack. He was wearing nothing but a t-shirt and shorts. Frank was always messing around with people. He was an innovator. He knew saying that he had a Ouija board would make people like Steve and Hooper scared. Hooper said,
Man, we ain't doing that shit.
Steve replied,
Dude, my friend used to do stuff like that and now he's possessed.
Frank said,
Don't worry, guys. I would never bring something like that. Or would I?
We were at the abandoned houses now and Steve was freaking out.
Man, what was that? I saw something move over there.
We looked around the abandoned houses for a while. We didn't need flashlights yet since it was only around 5 p.m. We decided to check out the other abandoned house just down the hill. We took a shortcut through a dense thicket of bushes. We were walking until I realized Frank was missing. Hey, do you guys know where Frank is? Just as I asked, we all heard a loud, ballsy sounding cackle come from around 20 meters behind us. Frank! I called out. Come here, we're almost to the house.
Okay.
Frank cackled. We proceeded to explore the property when Steve saw something running off in the woods.
Man, what was that? Guys, let's get out of here.
Hooper said, sounding worried. Steve started chasing it, saying it looked like a fox. We looked around for a little while, but we couldn't find it.
Man, was it a ghost?
Steve said.
Man, I'm telling y'all, I cannot take this shit no more. Let's get out of here.
As we were heading out of the woods, I thought to myself that maybe I should stay the night just for the sake of it. I called my dad and asked him if I could, in which he happily said yes. I told everyone that I was postponing the father-son night fishing to another night. When we finally got out of the woods, Steve started kissing the asphalt in relief. He seriously thought that something was following us. Steve is always really paranoid like that. We walked up the hill.
Man, I'm starving.
I suggest we just order pizza and keep it simple. And Frank liked the idea as well.
Nah, man, I want 5 Guys.
Hooper thought Five Guys was a great idea too. Five Guys doesn't do delivery, I said.
Well, why don't we just walk there?
Frank said. I replied with, oh, won't they be closed? Steve looked it up and said that they closed at midnight. It was around 7:45 as of the current moment, and pretty much dark by that point. We would most definitely make it to Five Guys in time. Do we have money? I asked.
Man, I got like $15 in my backpack.
That'll cover a burger and fries for each of us, I said.
Yep, that'll be enough.
Frank replied. I didn't think much of the prices, so we went along with it. Well, we better start walking, I said. We cut through some random farm to get to Boresdom Road, which eventually led us to walking on Gas House Pike towards Five Guys. It was around 7 p.m. Five Guys, which is around 7 miles away. It was completely dark by this point, and the roadside was really narrow and steep, and cars were whizzing nearly inches from us as we walked. This was extremely dangerous looking back on it. Steve was blasting rap music and dancing as we walked, and Frank was bragging about how he never told his parents that he left to go anywhere, let alone to Five Guys at 9 at night. We eventually reached a flat section of road after about an hour of walking. It was around 10 now, and Hooper had hit a wall. We were barely halfway to Five Guys, so we tried to convince him to push on, but he gave up.
Man, I'm calling my dad.
Hooper called his dad, who apparently agreed to drive us all the rest of the way to Five Guys, and pay for us as well. Around 5 minutes later, an old, rusty pickup truck pulled over, and a scraggly man with a beer belly told us to hop in. The truck smelled like cigarettes, and there were empty beer cans on the floor. You guys want to hit? Hooper's dad said jokingly. Nah, I'm good, I replied. The rest of the ride with Hooper's dad is spent talking about how these roads are the ones he would snowplow on when it snows, since that was what appeared to be his job. Nothing eventful happened when we were actually inside the Five Guys eating. The food was good, and we thanked Hooper's dad for the food, and he drove us back to the park where we started the night at. Boy, you're coming with me, Hooper's dad shouted. Hooper wanted to stay the night, but his dad would not let him.
You piece of shit! You fucking loser, you bitch!
Hooper screamed to his dad as they sped away in the truck, leaving only Steve, Frank, and myself. Well, what now? I asked. Frank replied with, Let's go to my trampoline! We sat down on Frank's trampoline when Steve had the bright idea to go ding-dong ditching. By now, the time was midnight, so most people would be sleeping. I agreed, and so did Frank. Most houses were uneventful, but there was this one old woman that came out and slowly glared around before turning back in. She took like 5 minutes to come out, and you could see each light turn on as she emerged. However, our next house would forever change the course of that night. We arrived at a typical-looking house that was painted white, with the American flag, along with a commander's flag hanging above the garage. It was a typical porch, many windows overlooking the front yard. Steve cockily ran up, rang the doorbell, and dipped. Steve and I tried running far, but Frank stayed behind at some scraggly, thin bush right by the driveway. We tried to signal for Frank to come on, but he didn't listen. We ran back to get Frank. But right as we were at the bush, the front door creaked open. We all crouched behind the bush as a stern-looking, bald, middle-aged man wearing a white tank top and boxer shorts emerged. Again, he was bald, had glasses, and had a decent scruffy beard and mustache. He looked like Walter White from Breaking Bad. He had a baseball hat in hand, and he started pacing around the driveway. Bro, I'm telling you, his eyes glazed over us at least 10 times. He even got within 5 feet from us at one point. He soon went onto his porch, sat in his rocking chair, and held his baseball bat. He stayed there for a solid 15 minutes before finally returning inside. My knees felt as if they were on fire. We sprinted crazy fast back to Frank's trampoline. We sat in his driveway contemplating on what had just happened.
Man, that shit was crazy,
Steve said. We then tried sleeping on Frank's trampoline, but since there was no insulation underneath, it got freezing very fast. To try and stay warm, we all huddled up underneath of a dirty firewood tarp. It did not do much at all. Steve kept squirming and farting under the tarp, so it was not fun at all. I eventually did fall asleep, and when I woke up, it was still 4 a.m. I guess out of nowhere, Frank got a burst of energy because he leapt up from the tarp and started bouncing on the trampoline. He's making a lot of noise too for 4 in the morning. He started laughing and shouting. His mom must have heard from the upstairs window, because not even 15 seconds later, his mom opened her bedroom window and yelled at Frank. Frank, you're grounded! You told me you were going to be at the park and not on the trampoline. You never even answered my phone calls. Come inside now. You're done. Frank ran inside, and that was the last of him. It was starting to get a little light out now, so Steve went home, as did I. I went to the Boy Scout camp out with one night certainly to remember.